Hello, Ectosage here on the Sage channel, and would you look at some of the lasers there. Anyway, this is an assortment of mods I've installed, everything from the big blaster cannons from the Star Wars, one of the Star Wars packs, to these little laser things here which just require energy, and basically I've gone ahead and used my D1 ship that I said was going to be a test bed and thrown it out there a bunch of times, and I'm just going to be showing you guys what's up. So you can see here, they were actually blasting on this for probably maybe 5 minutes before the shields finally went down, so these things don't have super duper powerful, but I thought it might be awesome to see a bunch of them take out one of these D1 warships that I put together. So you can see they're, well, pretty quickly taking out, and I love the fact that when they destroy the block they're aiming at, you see them all sort of shut off and refocus like that real quick. I've also, just so you know, I've sped up some of the footage throughout this whole video, off and on. Some I'm slowing it down, some I'm speeding it up, because some stuff, well, does take ages. Anyway, here, just a quick look over the damage. You can see it wiped out the turrets, and it left some of the other stuff there intact. That's actually because what I did with this is I put down all of those laser thingy-majigs all over the place, and then I went ahead and actually just set the D1 destroyer warships weapons to be owned by enemies and not the rest of the ship. So I just switched it, I cut it out there, but I switched it back so the whole ship is now owned by pirates, so they'll actually attack it. In the future, you'll actually see that I'll go ahead and set a ship to be completely owned by the pirate faction, with the exception of the cockpit. So that's how, if you're wondering how I'm flying stuff later on, that'll be how. Anyway, here, you can see one of the things that took the longest to burn away was actually the shield generators themselves. At this point, there was still a bunch of, well, semi-functional stuff in here. Looks like something out of a movie with the smokes and flames and all this. Just flying around as spectator. I'm upside down, but you can see the sleeping area here. I think it was the sleeping area has been breached. There's actually a world hole right there that I flew through. I'm like, oh wait, no, we don't want to see it through there. We want to see it through here. And look at that. It looks like something straight out of a movie. Oh, I love it. It's so awesome to see these beams just blasting away. Like I said, they're not really powerful enough to be a very decent weapon against a structure, but, I mean, I think their main purpose is just shooting down meteorites, or maybe fending off cyber hounds or something like that. Anyway, it's pretty awesome to see a trillion of them sort of surgically just cutting through the ship. And you can see almost every reactor is now exposed sitting there. It's a pretty nifty thing. Oh, also, I should point out, throughout a lot of this video, you might get some audio desync. That's because, well, I spent probably like 3 hours recording all the footage you'll see throughout this. That's a long time to sit in silence, so I ended up putting other stuff on. So I've gone through and fiddled about with the audio and post, so a lot of what you see is going to be done in post. Well, what you hear, I should say. Anyway, the beams all just shut off there. I unfortunately missed it as I was attempting to increase the amount of them there. And you can see the wreckage to our right there. In a second here, this is our second attack, basically. Instead of having the ship start a little closer like we did previously, this one I'm just starting it out from a bit of a distance and flying it in there. And you can see those big turbo blasters, that's the name of them, the big Star Wars turbo blasters, unloading on these things. And you can also see as the ship gets closer, you can rewind the footage if you want to see it again, more and more of these beams coming on, which I think is just really awesome. It's a great thing. I also love the fact that you can see the beams tracking the ship so perfectly, because the dev that made these lasers actually, it's hit scan weapon now. It's not like a lot of other photon things or laser things where it just shoots out a ton of bullets really in quick succession. These are, you know, it aims and it's instantly a beam hitting it. It's really awesome, this mod. And you can see there's huge amounts of the ship falling apart. It's been defeated. Its weapons are completely disabled at this point. And you can see that the lasers are having no mercy. They're just tactically targeting the systems that they want to take out. And like I said, this one, I was in the cockpit of it, but I'd set everything except for the cockpit to be owned by the pirate faction, so I could actually fly it in there. I could have, of course, just had all the little satellites owned by pirates, but that means if I want to fly something in there just to set something up or check something, well, they'd all be shooting at me, too, if I flew my actual character in there, too. So, decided to go against that. And you can see, some of these actually were floating away. Some of those little pirate ships, or I say pirate ships, the laser stations are drifting away, because if the if the cannons from the D1 warship hit them, it actually pushes them back a bit. So even though the laser ships technically won, a lot of them ended up drifting pretty far away because they don't actually have any thrusters. I mean, look at that carnage there. Just ripped the thing right open. A heck of a sight to see. It's beautiful. The wreckage in this game could be something else. Look at that torn open. I love the damage effects the devs added. And then look at our battlefield now. We just got tons and tons of little reactors smoking everywhere. Lots of little debris of the lasers that's broken off. You can see there's quite a few of these laser stations still sitting here ready to rock and roll if something else attacks. But you can see about maybe half of them did get taken out there in that attack. And of course now we have 2 large wrecks just sitting there. Anyhow, I copy this. I'm going to go ahead and put some more in. Oh, and there we go. I cut ahead to, ta-da! You can see a trillion in one of them. Each one has its own antenna. And then I went ahead and stuck in another one of these ships. This is me just quickly going ahead and saying, well, let's see what it's like when we up the range on these turbo blasters and set them to be owned by pirates. Because these have a much greater range, obviously, as you could see there when I cranked it up, than the lasers, which only have about a standard, you know, like a 800, 900 range to them. And of course, they're a bit derpy, these things. They end up hitting each other a little bit sometimes, taking out your own shields, but I decided to give them a bit of a head start where they can actually start firing from afar before we go flying in there. And I think this is an incredible shot as you see all these beams start striking the D1 warship as we approach. You know, at first, oh my god, that beam right over your head. It's like such an incredible sight to see from the cockpit. And then this is from the far. This is the same camera angle we started out with when the ship slowly moved away. And it's a heck of a sight to see. You can see some of the beams are actually missing. I think that's partially because they're aiming at the collision volume of the turrets and not the turret itself. But anyway, it ends up being quite the sight as it drifts in there. And the reason why it's turning like that is because I'm still in control of it. I'm trying to turn it that way we don't just drift past all of the laser stations, and trying to rotate it so we still have cannons firing on these laser stations as well. Boy, oh boy, it's a heck of a thing. I love the way those lasers track. That's one of the reasons this keeps going so long after the ship's out of frame, is because you can just see them all just tracking clearly. And then look at that. That would be a hellish sight. They'd be then there, you're like, okay, I've lost almost all of my top turrets except for one on the left there that's every now and again firing. How much longer until I'm in serious trouble? And it actually, right here, I'm still trying to turn and position it so we can go a big forward push and get back in there, but I don't think that ever really happens here. You can actually see that the pretty much front half of the ship has been completely disintegrated. There's pretty much nothing left there except for some support strats. And again, I have to point out how much I love seeing those lasers just track. Here we go, as the camera passes through it, you can see just how much is missing. The whole interior section there, unlike some of the other ones where the reactors just got disabled, in this one, look at that. They're just completely gone. The bridge has also been taken out, and you can see here, I'll even put an arrow in. Our characters actually just drifted out from the cockpit because the actual seat we're sitting in got blasted away. Even though it wasn't even owned by an enemy faction, they still hit it in the crossfire. A heck of a scene to see with that many lasers. And you can see, even though we got so many, it's still not exactly the quickest devastation of a ship ever, because they aren't the strongest thing, but it is, well, as I said, quite the sight to see. And for a millisecond there, you probably saw the UI where it was 1,000,000,001 target reticles sitting on the thing. And I think we actually get pretty far out here. I think they finish off the interior bits here. We can look inside it and see just that's where all the reactors were. 2 shield generators were in here on the bottom. The bridge was above this. Everything pretty much got scrapped here. And they just stopped firing because, well, like I said, everything pretty much got scrapped there. It's a husk of a ship. And quite a beautiful thing to see the nacelles just sort of drifting along with it. I'm not sure if the lasers actually targeted the jump drives inside the nacelles. Considering I'm seeing flames coming out of them, I'm going to guess so. It's a heck of a sight to see, though. I love the devastation that you get in this game. It can end up lagging, it can end up dropping your frame rate, and particularly your sim speed, but is a heck of a thing. Anyway, here we go. I'm setting up another one to rock and roll again. This one, what I'm going to do is just leave it out here. You can see the distance we were at was pretty far out. One of those ships that it's shooting at is actually still had some components that were owned by us, apparently. But now it's going ahead and actually, for the most part, targeting all those laser stations. Now I just want to do sort of a proof that, yes, you can with these ion cannons or blaster turbo cannons. I keep forgetting the bloody name. Turbo cannons. Just sit at a distance and simply annihilate anyone attempting to use such weapons against you. Not that, you know, if you had even 2 of the D1 warships, I think you'd be fine against these little laser satellites, but I don't know, I thought it was pretty cool to sit here. And also, I've sped up the footage quite a bit here to even unrealistically fast speeds, I think, just because well, it did take a while. Their accuracy isn't brilliant. They're sort of like a fire hose if you watch the way they spray. It just sort of like shoots out a bunch, and then does it again and does it again. But they're successfully taking out the drones, and it is an interesting sight to see this strange rectangle sitting in a distance with a bunch of blue lines shooting at everything near you. And slowly them all vanishing from stream, because like I said, they do actually push the the blaster beams, the plasma bolts, whatever you want to call them, push the objects about. Pretty nifty things, though. And look at the devastation. Now it's spread out pretty close. I mean, if I had enough time, I wanted to dedicate the time, I could probably sat here and watched as I slowly drifted into the planet's orbit and got pulled in, but I ended up not doing that. And I don't have any atmospheric re-entry mods or anything in this world, so I don't know, it would have just sort of been them hitting the ground. Anyway, once again, bunch of wreckage here. I can't help it. It looks pretty cool. Yeah, it's a pretty nifty sight. It's still firing a little bit there. Yeah, pretty nifty sight to see that much carnage and devastation. Anyway, this next one here, I actually decided, well, let's go ahead and destroy the ships that we currently have sitting about, or at least disable them. So this one had its weapons set way to the far super distant, the one we're blasting apart in 12 seconds here. It's the one that we were just using to shoot at them. Well, I can't change its weapons distance anymore, because of course I've set those to be owned by pirates, so I decided to, instead of just deleting it, flew in another ship and ended up taking out. Turns out the D1 warship is extremely vulnerable to attack from directly below or above. I mean, look at it. It just got completely shredded by another D1 ship. We just came up below it and wrecked house. Anyway, I decided at this point, we're going to rebuild the laser drone or laser satellite army. So there you go. You can see I've rebuilt a fair amount of it. Actually going to keep on building to it. You have no idea. Quite a few of these, basically in a sphere where I sat in the middle and just placed them all around us to make a lot of them. Even this isn't complete. As you can see, I kept on placing them in there. And then I went ahead and destroyed the turrets that I had on board one of our ships and decided, well, let's go ahead and put some lasers on it instead. Let's see how these lasers would actually fare against each other. And actually what's going to happen here in a second, I decided that before we do that, let's actually see how a D1 warship with lasers like this on it would fare against a D1 warship with the turbo cannons on it. So I went ahead and did the same thing. I actually did a copy of it before I went ahead and set out on this battle. But, oh dear. Yep, right, it saw some wreckage behind it that decided to blast out, which was actually pretty damn awesome. But you can see there, the other D1 warship with the big old Star Wars cannons has started pounding on it already. And, well, obviously things aren't going so well for us. You can see I'm actually dodging some of these by simply aiming down and then they fire and I aim up. But, yeah, they ended up landing some heavy impacts. Also, there were some blocks on the lower ship there that you could have seen in the left that were still owned by us, because that one had only set the turrets to be owned by the enemy faction previously. So that means part of the lasers on this D1 warship that is getting completely wrecked right now decided to target that instead of all of our firepower going into the one D1 with the big old cannons on it. And you can see, well, obviously it's completely disintegrated, hasn't it? I mean, there's pretty much nothing left of the bulk of the ship. The main, nacelles are sort of still there, but the area where we're sitting is, well, it's getting pretty messed up, and the whole front is just gone completely. All the turrets and everything have disintegrated. In fact, in a second here, you're going to be in for a, change of scenery as we get pushed in the first person because the cockpit actually got separated from everything. Amazingly, they didn't hit the cockpit, unlike the lasers, but, yeah, they completely annihilated it. And, of course, because their accuracy gets so poor at a distance like this, they end up keep firing because I keep missing the object, which means, or the one little component they still want to destroy, but they end up, hitting everything around it, ending up continuing to fire forever, disintegrating into ever smaller chunks, never getting that last little piece they want to get rid of, but causing hefty amounts of damage, as you can see here. And I think I show one or two more pictures or angles here where you can see the range on these things is kind of insane. I keep wanting to call them ion cannons. These turbo blasters are absolutely mad. Absolutely mad. I quite love them, actually. Oh, my phone's being silly. Anyway, you can't see it here, but I'm just flying all the way out to the maximum distance, and I think they really can hit at the distance of about 9,000 meters out, or 9 kilometers, and I'm flying back towards it now. As you can see, just there's the wreckage, how far it flew away, and here's our ships, and actually the whole, from what looks like a minefield of everything. Anyway, once again, went ahead and did our fanciful thing. This one, because we kept ownership of the one, I just, instead of sending another ship to blow it up, just went ahead and set its range down to that. I then went ahead over here and pasted in the ship that's currently shooting that silly laser beam. And that is one of the ones with the laser, the D1 warship with laser modification. And it's flying into that big ball of doom. And of course getting distracted by little things that it sees that it can blast. You can imagine this thing being fantastic for clearing a minefield. Or of course, as I mentioned earlier, taking out asteroids. I really do wish the vanilla game had a laser like this. Something that against an actual warship would be pretty much useless, but would be fantastic for shooting down incoming missiles and meteorites. Anyway, as you can see here, look how all these are turning on. I know there's a sound I put in there, but it also is just, you just hear it in your head as well, just the idea of them all powering up, and of course most of them are focusing on the same point. That's a view from pretty close inside it, and they're just completely annihilating whatever direct point they're at. It still takes them a while, but they're, well, like a modern day laser, sort of just burning and burrowing a hole straight through the ship till they get to that thing they want to hit, and taking it out. And like before, you can see me maneuvering the ship here. I realize that, well, we're not really, I can't tell exactly if we're returning fire, but everything on the top of the ship seems to be on fire. Let's bring the bottom of the ship up so we can have those lasers firing back on it all. Also, of course, I'm cutting around a whole bunch because it was quite laggy, and, well, since I sped up almost all of this footage to at least a 150, sometimes 400% speed, when I moved my camera, it was really jumpy and a little upsetting at times. Anyway, you can see here the front, what was it, maybe just one pylon with weapons has been completely annihilated. The second one's sort of falling apart, and the third one just had an explosion with it. The ship is slowly, well, ceasing to be. The crazy thing is, though, oh my god, look at all that. It's a little hard to see who's firing away from the warship and who's firing at it because they're all the same color, but, Jesus Christ, it's crazy to see that. I almost lost my train of thought there. Anyway, because I set up all of these laser stations in a sphere this time, as the ship moves into this area now, and pretty much I've given up on control, I turned off the inertial dampeners, just let it drift. As the ship moves in there, all of these lasers are just going to be, well, focusing straight into the center of it. And of course I changed these laser stations a little bit too. I added even more lasers to them than the earlier ones that you saw in the video. So it ends up being quite the sight to see, obviously. Well, almost this whole video, I think, has been quite the sight to see. Look at that. Just the wreckage. It's like somebody pushed it through a grinder or something. It came in as a ship, and it's coming out the other side as just some scrap metal that's been bent and pressed and tweaked, and just floating bits everywhere. It's, yeah. The destruction in this game can really be something else. I guess it should be pretty good, considering that was sort of their original little thing, was just two ships crashing into each other and a bit of building here and there, eh? Game's come a long way, still think it has farther to go, but damn was that cool, eh? Damn was that cool. Anyway, that's about it. I think I buzzed the camera about looking at some carnage and wreckage floating about. You can see one of our little stations got bumped about, and in fact, if you rewatch this, keep your eyes open, you can see a few of them colliding into the ship as it passes through there. Yeah. Pretty cool thing. Anyway, I wanted to go ahead and put 2 or 3 more of them in and try to set a bunch of them up and then send them all in there at the same time if I could, or figure something out. But the game actually ended up crashing shortly after this. Before I could do that, well, as Space Engineers, I did have about 8 mods in this world, including a Stargate mod, and actually the Shift F5 quick save function and just standard saving had stopped working on me. It kept giving me a memory error. No idea why, but yeah, anyway, that ended up being about it. Oh god, spinning the camera around. Look at it, it's like a bunch of warships just sitting out here waiting. Should we move in? Oh well, this one's not going anywhere, but this one is. I think this is the one I actually ended up copying and trying to set it up, because it's the laser one. Like I said, was going to have 2 of them or 3 of them all set up with lasers, but universe didn't like that idea anymore. and ended up saying good night, sweet prince, and crashed my game. Anyway, thanks a bunch for watching. Hope you guys have all enjoyed this, and I shall see you all next time. Ta-ta.